Open a Norwegian's car and you will find almost nothing in it. No coffee cups wedged in the holder from this morning and 3 mornings before that. No charging cables snaking across the back seat. No air freshener hanging from the mirror filling the cabin with synthetic pine. No gym bag in the boot from a session 3 weeks ago. No parking receipts collecting in the door pocket. No sunglasses collection spread across the dash. The car is clean, almost empty. It is a vehicle that gets people from one place to another, and then it is parked, and that is the entirety of what it is expected to do. This video is built around a single premise that explains every item on the list. In Nordic culture, a car is a vehicle. In a lot of other cultures, and this is not a criticism of anyone in particular, a car has quietly become something considerably more complicated than that. It has become an extension of the home, an annex of the office, a dining room on wheels, a secondary storage unit, and a mobile expression of personal identity. 8 specific things Scandinavians never keep in their car, what each one reveals about a completely different relationship with objects and space, and what applying even one of them could actually change about how your own daily life feels. Before we continue, if you'd consider subscribing, it only takes a few seconds and helps the channel out a lot. So today we are looking at 8 things Scandinavians never keep in their car. So let's start with the one that most clearly illustrates the difference between a car as a vehicle and a car as a dining room. Fast food bags, coffee cups, and food wrappers as permanent fixtures of the car interior. The specific Nordic relationship with eating in the car is worth understanding before the contrast lands. Nordic food culture, covered in more depth in other videos on this channel, treats meals as events that happen at tables with other people, at a pace that the food deserves, with attention paid to what is being eaten. Eating in a car while driving is not impossible in a Nordic context, but it is understood as a compromise made under specific circumstances, rather than as a normal default mode of consuming food. The logical extension of this is that a car that regularly contains the evidence of meals eaten in it is a car being used for something it was not designed to do, and the accumulation of cups and wrappers and bags in the cabin is a visible record of a habit that Nordic car culture has largely not developed in the first place. The research on eating while driving is worth naming here, because it goes beyond the obvious safety concerns into something more relevant to why the Nordic default produces a cleaner car. Studies on distracted eating, consuming food while engaged in another activity, find consistently that it reduces both the enjoyment of the food and the accuracy of the satiety signals that tell the body when it has eaten enough. A meal eaten in a car while navigating traffic is a meal eaten in a divided attention state, where neither the driving nor the eating is receiving the focus either deserves. The Nordic alternative is not heroic self-denial. It is simply the result of a food culture that never normalized this particular combination in the first place, which means the cups and the wrappers never accumulated because the meals were never eaten there. The practical thing to take from this is not that you should never eat in a car, because sometimes the schedule actually does not allow for anything else, and that is simply life. It is the question of whether eating in the car is something you are choosing because it is actually the only option, or something that has become a default so normalized that the option of stopping and eating properly has stopped appearing on the menu of available choices. The car that always has food debris in it is a car where eating while driving has become the default rather than the exception. Changing the default is the change, not managing the debris afterward. That is the first thing. The second one is directly related, because once the car stops being used as a dining room, it also tends to stop being used as a storage unit for the rest of what daily life generates. The second thing is the collection of items in the boot or back seat that have been there for months without being needed, used, or removed. The gym bag from before the holiday, the folding chair from the one summer event, the toolkit that lives in the car permanently on the theory that it might be needed someday. The bags for life that were put in the car to be taken into the shop and have been there since February. The Nordic car tends not to accumulate this category of item because the Nordic relationship with the car as a vehicle actively resists treating it as secondary storage. A vehicle stores fuel and the things needed for the journey. It does not store things that might be needed at some unspecified future point. because that function is what homes are for. The specific clarity of this distinction between what belongs in a car and what belongs in a home produces a boot that contains what is needed for the car rather than what has not yet found its way back to the house. There is a cognitive dimension to this worth naming. Research on visual clutter and cognitive load has found that the presence of unresolved items in a space, objects that are in a location because they have not been dealt with rather than because they belong there, produces a low-level but persistent cognitive load. Every time the boot is opened, the items that should not be there register as an unresolved task. Multiplied across weeks of daily car use, this background processing represents a meaningful drain on attention and mental energy. The Nordic car that contains only what belongs in a car is not just tidier, it is also less cognitively expensive to inhabit. The practical takeaway here is a single rule that Nordic car culture operates by implicitly. When something comes out of the car, it goes into the house. Not into the boot temporarily, not onto the back seat until there is a better moment. Into the house. This rule, applied consistently, prevents the accumulation entirely rather than requiring periodic clearouts to undo it. 2 things covered. The third one is smaller, but arguably more immediately noticeable than the first 2, because it involves the senses rather than just the visual field. The third thing is the air freshener, the little tree hanging from the rearview mirror, the vent clip releasing waves of synthetic ocean breeze, the spray applied before getting in each morning. The object whose entire purpose is to make the car smell like something it does not smell like. Nordic car culture's resistance to air fresheners is the car-specific expression of a broader Nordic discomfort with synthetic fragrance that has been covered in the home habits and hygiene videos on this channel. The underlying premise is the same: a space that smells of nothing, or of the people and activities that naturally occupy it, is a neutral space. A space that smells of a manufactured scent is a space that is performing a version of itself, and the Nordic instinct toward honest environments, rather than performed ones, applies to the interior of a car as clearly as it applies to a home. There is also a practical health dimension worth noting. The European Commission has documented that many synthetic fragrance compounds commonly used in air fresheners release volatile organic compounds into enclosed spaces. A car, which is a small and often poorly ventilated space, concentrates these compounds considerably more than an open room would. The air freshener that is supposed to make the drive more pleasant is releasing chemical compounds into a space where the occupants have limited ability to get away from them. Nordic car culture's avoidance of this product is partly aesthetic and partly, without necessarily being articulated as such, a reasonable response to putting a chemical emitter in a small enclosed space where you spend time every day. The shift this suggests is simply not replacing the air freshener when the current one runs out. The car, absent the freshener, smells of the fabric and materials it is made of, which is to say, it smells of nothing in particular. That is the neutral state. The question of whether the freshener was improving on neutral, or simply adding to it, is worth asking once, honestly, before buying the next one. Quick stop here. If you like these videos, and especially if you like this way of life, I cannot recommend our guide enough. We built it for this exact audience, and we hear back from subscribers regularly about how it has changed something in how they approach their daily lives. That means everything to us. Check it out in the top comment below this video or directly at www.scandinaviansecrets.shop. Now back to the video. The fourth thing is one that produces the most cultural specificity of anything on this list, because it connects the car to the social norm covered in the video about why Scandinavians never try to impress anyone. Political bumper stickers, personal slogans, sports team declarations, and strong opinions displayed on the exterior of the car. Nordic car culture is almost entirely free of this category of self-expression. A Norwegian road contains cars that are identifiable only by their make, model, and color. No declarations of political affiliation, no family stick figures, no statements about the driver's opinions, values, allegiances, or sense of humor. The car exterior in Nordic culture is a vehicle exterior. It communicates what make of car it is, and nothing further. The connection to the broader cultural norm is direct. The same instinct that prevents a Swede from announcing their promotion at a dinner party or building an obviously status-signaling home prevents them from converting the exterior of their car into a broadcast of their identity and beliefs. The car is not a platform. The road is not an audience. The people driving behind you are not invited to know your political views simply by virtue of being behind you in traffic. This is not repression of opinion or identity. Norwegians and Swedes have strong opinions and express them in appropriate contexts. The road is simply not one of them. The practical reflection this invites is a question about what the items on the exterior of your car are actually doing. If they are actually for you, expressing something that gives you personal satisfaction regardless of whether anyone reads it, that is one kind of reason. If they are primarily for other people, attempting to communicate something about who you are to strangers who will forget you in the next traffic light, the Nordic question would be whether that audience is the right one for whatever you are trying to say. The fifth thing is one that has become ubiquitous in many countries but remains rare in Nordic cars. The permanent phone mount with navigation always active, several apps visible, notifications running. Nordic drivers use phones for navigation when navigation is needed. What they consistently do not do is maintain a permanent phone installation in the car that converts the driving experience into an extension of the digital environment they just left at home or at work. The phone mount that is always there, the screen that is always on, the notifications that continue to arrive during the drive, these represent the specific failure of the car to function as a transition space between destinations. The drive, which in Nordic culture tends to be understood as its own discrete activity requiring its own discrete attention, is converted by the permanent phone installation into a continuation of the connected state that the drive was supposed to temporarily interrupt. Research on driving distraction is unambiguous. Visual interaction with a screen during driving, even with a hands-free mount, increases reaction time and reduces awareness of the driving environment. But beyond the safety dimension, there is a quality of experience argument that Nordic car culture makes implicitly. A drive that is also a navigation session, that is also a podcast, that is also a notification monitor, is not really a drive. It is a continuation of the ambient stimulation of modern life in a slightly different physical container. The Nordic car, used as a vehicle rather than as an extension of the connected environment, offers a specific and increasingly rare experience. Time that is structured by a single activity, going somewhere, without competition from everything else. The sixth thing connects to the consumer behavior covered in the Never Buy videos on this channel, but applies specifically to what accumulates in the car over time. The loyalty card collection, the parking receipts, the loose change, the expired coupons, and the various small paper items that build up in the door pockets and the center console until they are cleaned out in an annual ritual that produces a small bag of things that have no value and should have been dealt with at the point of arrival. The Nordic car tends not to accumulate this category, because the Nordic default is to deal with items at the point they enter the car, rather than deferring that decision to an unspecified future moment. A parking receipt is taken out of the car when the driver gets out of the car. A loyalty card is in a wallet rather than loose in a door pocket. The center console contains the items that belong in a car, not the items that have not yet been returned to wherever they belong. This is not a system. It is the absence of a system, specifically the absence of the deferral system that most people operate, whereby things go into the car temporarily and then become permanent through accumulated inertia. The practical application of this is a single habit applied at the point of exit from the car. When getting out of the car, take out whatever came in during the journey: the receipt from the drive-thru, the water bottle from the gym, the shopping bag that is now empty. Out of the car, into the bin or into the house, at the point of exit. This habit, applied consistently rather than as a periodic clear-out, means the car never accumulates anything, because nothing ever gets the chance to become permanent. The seventh thing is one that has become so common in many countries that its absence in a Nordic car is the thing that stands out. Multiple charging cables for every device, permanently installed, always available. Nordic drivers charge their phones when they need to charge their phones. What Nordic cars tend not to have is a permanent cable infrastructure for every possible device that might ever need charging in the car, strung across seats and consoles as a standing installation. The cable that is always there for the device that sometimes needs charging is a solution to a problem that has been normalized into an expectation. My phone might run low, therefore the car must always be equipped to address that. The Nordic version of this is, my phone might run low, therefore I will charge it before I need it to not be low. The car that has no permanent charging infrastructure is not a car whose occupants accept dead phones. It is a car whose occupants manage their phone charge as a domestic matter rather than a vehicular one, which means the cables live in the house where charging primarily happens, rather than in the car where it occasionally needs to happen. The distinction is small, but the effect on the interior of the car is considerable. A car without permanent cables across every surface is a car with considerably more visual calm, and visual calm in a space where you spend time every day compounds into something that affects how the daily commute actually feels. And for the eighth and final thing, the one that draws all the others together into a single observation about what the Nordic car is fundamentally for. The collection of items described as an emergency kit that has never been used and will probably never be needed, but lives permanently in the boot, generating the specific comfort of preparedness without ever being called upon. Nordic cars carry what the journey requires. They do not carry anticipatory solutions to improbable problems. This is not recklessness. Nordic drivers carry what is legally required, what the environment actually demands. Winter tires in winter, a reflective vest, the items that Nordic roads and Nordic conditions actually make necessary. What they tend not to carry is the vast secondary kit of objects, kept against the possibility of unlikely events, that in practice resolves into a collection of never-used items, adding weight and occupying space indefinitely. The distinction the Nordic approach draws is between real preparation, carrying what the actual conditions of the actual roads you drive actually require, and anticipatory accumulation, carrying things against the possibility of scenarios that have not occurred in years of driving and are statistically improbable. The first is sensible, the second is clutter with the word preparedness attached to justify its presence. The Nordic boot that contains only what is needed for the journey is not a reckless boot. It is a boot that has asked the honest question, when did I last use this, and when do I actually expect to need it? 8 things, and the single premise they all express, stated plainly now that all 8 have been covered. A car is a vehicle. It gets you somewhere and then it stops. Everything in it should serve that purpose. Everything else is using the car as something it was not designed to be, and the accumulation of those uses, the dining room function, the storage unit function, the office annex function, the identity broadcast function, is what produces the car that feels, when you get into it, like a mobile version of everything you were trying to get away from when you left. The Nordic car that contains almost nothing is not empty, because Nordic people have less. It is empty because they made a decision about what the car is for, and they have been consistent about that decision every time they got out of it. That consistency is the thing that is actually available to anyone, starting today, starting with whatever is in the car right now that has no business being there. If you want to go deeper into Nordic culture beyond this channel, not just what Scandinavians do but what it actually feels like to live this way, we have a second channel called Nordic Ways. It goes inside the same culture from a completely different angle. Search Nordic Ways on YouTube and you will find it. All the sources and data referenced in this video are listed in the description below. If this changed how you think about your own car, following the channel means a lot. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Och som alltid, vi ses nästa gång.